good evening, depending on where you're connecting from. To introduce myself, my name is Manjunath Agali. I'm part of Citrix Ready team leading the desktop ecosystem. I'm your host for today's webinar, and today we have SecureAt with us. Thank you all for attending the webinar today, and I would like to welcome you all to the Citrix Ready Technical Webinar Series, where we showcase how Citrix and our partners have integrated to deliver valuable products and solutions to common problems faced by our customers. Along with me, I have the main speakers, Darren Pendergraft, Vice President of Marketing from SecureAt, and Sean Dan, Senior Sales Engineer from SecureAt. Moving on to introduce Citrix Ready. Citrix Ready is an end-to-end technology partner program that showcases and recommends third-party products, solutions, and services that demonstrates compatibility with Citrix products. Customers can quickly and easily find solutions recommended by Citrix in the Citrix Ready Marketplace by navigating to citrixready.com/ready. For more information on the Citrix Ready program, you can navigate to citrix.com/partnerprograms/citrixready. Moving on, Citrix Ready program was launched in the year 2007. Citrix Ready program has 950 plus technology partners with over 25,000 products verifications and over 20 lakh online catalog page views. Moving on, a brief introduction about SecureAt. SecureAt delivers innovative identity and information security solutions to protect on-premises, cloud, mobile, web, and VPN resources. SecureAt is established in the year 2005 and has more than 110 employees. SecureAt are Citrix Ready partners since 2010. Today, we are here to learn and see how SecureAt integrates with Citrix NetScaler to enable strong authentication and frictionless single sign-on in one solution for Citrix XenApp, Citrix XenDesktop, and other web applications. Also, we will see how SecureAt lets you balance strengthening security with minimizing impact to your end users. Before we start the presentation, if you have any questions during the webinar, please use the question panel on the right-hand side, and we will take your questions in the question and answer session. So without any further delay, please welcome our first speaker, Darren Pendergraft, Vice President of Marketing from SecureAt. Hi, Darren.
Hello, Mr. Thank you very much.
Series, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. SecureAt is very proud to be a Citrix partner, and we believe we've got a great presentation for you this morning that shows you how you can use the combined Citrix infrastructure and SecureAt technology to create a strong remote access system with a wonderful user experience. And we know when we're working with our doctors and nurses and our caregivers, user experience is everything. The way I'd like to sort of paint the picture and give you some background is I'd like to show you some of the reality, some of the background and some of the situations that we're hearing from our healthcare customers in the market, some of the challenges they're facing. And then we want to talk to you about how the combined solution addresses those challenges, makes for a really good user experience while improving security. And then when we get actually, I want to transition into a little bit more of a technology discussion. I'm going to bring my colleague Sean Dion in, and he's going to go through a live demonstration of how the two technologies work together. And then, as Manju said, please send your questions in. If it's a quick one, we'll probably send you a response during the presentation. If it's something that deserves a little bit more conversation, we'll be happy to save some time at the end for Q&A. All right, so let's get started. I want to talk to you a little bit about what we're hearing from our healthcare customers that's really creating some headaches for IT departments. So, one of the really wonderful things about the Internet of Things is that many of our clinical care devices are now becoming network enabled, they're becoming smart, they're generating a very large volume of data. That is fantastic. We are making clinical care decisions using a lot more information, a lot more data, and so, the end result is better care, a higher level of care, with a lot more information that our caregivers have access to. So, the net result is all of these network devices are generating a lot of data. So that's good. We can use that data. And then with the proliferation, along with the proliferation of all this data, is the availability and the capability of really good mobile devices. I mean, we're now seeing doctors and nurses routinely carrying iPads and tablets and mobile devices around. They're getting access to that data. The applications are very rich. It allows them to have all of this data at their fingertips. Now, in order to facilitate both of these market trends, we've seen IT departments in healthcare really transition to a cloud computing architecture, and they've had to really also improve their remote access and to support the mobile devices, right? So you need a very strong, high-speed, reliable remote channel in addition to access to cloud applications, because if you're storing a lot of data, obviously your mobile devices are not going to be able to store all that data. You'll want to move that off into the cloud. So we're seeing these two industry trends really work together to create some headaches, right? Because you've got a lot more data, you've got mobile devices that want access, and so really you have to be thinking about how you're going to protect all of that data. The sad part in all of this story is that many healthcare organizations are focused on patient care first, right? We all want that. We want better care for our patients. We want quicker recovery. We want that high level of care, but we're increasingly becoming a target of attack. Medical records are increasingly coming under attack as they contain a complete person's identity, medical records, financial records, all the history, and so unfortunately we've got a lot more data, a lot more mobile devices, and we're increasingly coming under attack, all the while government regulations such as HIPAA and other mandates are saying it's critically important to protect this data. Now, fortunately for all of us on this call and for all of us in the industry, Citrix really has set the standard in our minds for secure remote access. When we talk to customers, Citrix really is the standard. The technology is highly available, it's scalable, it's secure, and so what is happening in the market as we start looking at more and more of these breaches and these outside attacks is because Citrix provides such a secure gateway and it's such a standard in the industry, the attackers have had to basically change tactics. And so they're still probing networks, they're still looking for application flaws, but what they've started doing now is they've put a lot more focus on stealing valid credentials, because sometimes in this whole infrastructure, the human users are in fact the weakest link. They can easily be tricked into opening an infected email or an attachment, and especially if the attacker's clever, it may look like a legitimate email. That infects the user's machine. The attackers start recording usernames and passwords, and then they log back in through the secure gateway using valid credentials. And as we've seen, they've been doing it very successfully. Again, this is the sad part of this. We're in this to increase patient care, to improve the lives of our patients and get them well, and instead we're increasingly coming under attack. It's just not fair. It's not fair, and these breaches are huge. The problem here is that they're pervasive. Because of this complete user identity, no one's safe. If you look at the recent headlines, we've had 3 large-scale data breaches in less than 9 months, over 95 million health records stolen with a lot of data in it. And so what that means for the organization is there's a very high cost when a breach occurs. We're seeing research that puts the cost of a stolen healthcare record at over $360. And we're also seeing that attackers are very clever, they're very patient, they're very sneaky. They get in and very carefully start moving around until they identify where the patient records are being stored. They probe around, and then they attack. They remove as much data as they can before we're able to sort of close the gap and lock them out. Another study has shown that when you're looking at the cost of business partners, you can be expecting up to $1 million in overall cost when you have a breach. So I think everyone understands that not only is there a financial cost, there's a loss of credibility, there's frustration on the part of our patients and our our constituents. So this problem really is pervasive and expensive. And again, I showed you 3 major breaches in the last 9 months, but we're seeing that many organizations are being probed. Many, not everyone has a public large-scale breach, but we're seeing a lot of organizations, a lot of business associates, a lot of affiliates getting, basically having reconnaissance attacks. Attackers will log in, look to see what they can see, and then sit and wait for an opportunity to attack. When we look at the statistics across the industry, 91% of organizations, if you look at the last 2 years, not just the last 9 months, but over 2 years, 91% have had some sort of attack. And if you're in that 9%, I've got bad news for you. It's just a waiting game. It's going to come. It's going to happen. These people are persistent, they're well-funded, and they are patient. And what that means is we really need to be thinking about how we can contain this new threat to our organization. Now, the immediate reaction when you look at statistics like this and when you hear about these attacks is you say, well, it's obvious we have to increase security. We have to add more layers of security into our existing infrastructure to make it harder for these people to get in. The problem is that when you make it harder for the attackers, very often you make it harder for your users as well. And especially in healthcare, where lives hang in the balance, where patient care is the prime consideration here, you really have to find a way to balance improving security while maintaining a very good ease of use or a good user experience. We sometimes in the industry, we call this a very frictionless way of improving security. So you need improved security, but you can't put the burden of the improved security on your end users. You need to find other innovative ways to improve security, and that's what we're going to talk to you about today. So how do we think we can do this? Well, typically what you would do in this situation, it's very, very common, is you would add a second factor. And what we want to talk to you about today is not only adding a second factor of user authentication, but we want to take that one step further. SecureAt and Citrix are taking it one step further, and we actually want to propose to you an adaptive second factor authentication solution. We'll show you what that means. Adaptive is what we think is the next generation of second factor, which enables you to collect information about the user, about the device they're using, about a lot of different things. And if it fits a user profile that we've seen before and the risk probability of that authentication is low, you don't need to apply that second factor in all situations. You can use those other risk factors to allow people into the system. So that's what we call stepping down the authentication. If someone fits a user profile and a behavior that you've seen, you can actually not force them in all situations to do the second factor, and this is an important distinction. Now, if the user does something strange to you, if they do something that's out of character or that doesn't fit their profile, you absolutely can put them through that second factor authentication, which is the strong security step, and force them to verify their identity. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about how we do that and how that looks. Now, most people think of strong authentication as two-factor authentication. I've got a slide here that shows you the most common two-factor authentication methods. These are all very strong, some of them better than others. None of them on their own, we believe, are a silver bullet. None of these solve the problem outright. SecureAuth, we believe that you need to use the second factor that fits their use case. And remember, the use case we're talking about today is a very low friction use case. So let me just give you an example of what I mean. So when you look at this slide, you can say, okay, SMS one-time password. You would get a text on a mobile phone, and then when you go to username and password, it would ask you to put in your PIN, right? So that is a very strong second factor. A lot of people are using it. It works well in the healthcare industry and many other industries, but it does require you to have a mobile phone available and type in another PIN code. So for many end users, this is fine. But when we're thinking about our doctors and nurses, sometimes that additional step is too much. And so we might want to look at other second factors that maybe have a better ease of use or better user experience. So let's talk about that a little bit more. So this kind of gets to what we call adaptive. Now, as I said, no one of these second factors, we believe, is a silver bullet. So our approach to coming up with a very strong security solution that allows a very good user experience is by stacking up several of the second factor bits of information that we have available. And I've listed some of them here. And I'll go into a little bit more detail in a second. But the point I wanted to make here is if you look at any one of these on their own, you could say, well, you know, that may not be conclusive, a conclusive enough second factor in our organization. And I would agree with you. But if you take all of these and you sum them up, you get a very good, a very strong profile of the user that you can use to create a risk profile and then either authenticate that individual into your organization, into your network, into your applications, or reject them outright. Okay, so the point that I want to make is for good user experience, very often you have to use multiple second factors. So let's talk about what we're using and what we're seeing in healthcare, and you know, as we go, I'll sort of describe the advantages to each. So one of the most obvious ones, and I've got a case study that we'll go through at the end of the presentation that talks about this a little bit, but device fingerprinting is one of the second factors that we believe is a very good user experience and provides a lot of security information to you, but is never good enough on its own, right? I want to be clear here that I'm not talking about a fingerprint reader. A lot of you have seen like the iPhone with its biometric thumbprint, you know, reader and that sort of thing. That is a wonderful second factor. But what I'm talking about here is actually taking a snapshot of the configuration of your device so that we can recognize it every time you use it to log in, right? So the first time you would have to register the device, and it's a very straightforward registration. You know, if you've ever gone to a website and it says, oh, hey, it looks like you're logging in on a new device. You know, do you use this regularly? Do you want to add this to your profile? That's what I'm talking about. It's that device profile or fingerprint where we record certain aspects of the device, and then on subsequent authentications, we compare those attributes to the device profile we've stored. So things we look at when you're logging in from a device is, you know, the browser configuration, what language is installed, what fonts do you have, browser plugins, you know, your IP address, resolution, all these things. So we create this profile of how you're logging in. We store that data. And so then if you come in and you're using a known registered device that hasn't changed significantly, we can say, okay, this looks like a user that we would expect to be logging into the system. So that's one second factor that we could start to layer up to create a really nice risk profile. Another one that's a little bit more sophisticated, but one that we're seeing as being increasingly more important is actually looking at the IP address and the reputation of that IP. And so there are many services available right now that you can say, okay, I've got a user logging in, and they're coming in from a particular IP address. What do we know anything about this IP address? Is it a known botnet IP? Is this IP address associated with a Tor anonymous browser network? And so if you're seeing a user log in and they've got a valid username and password, but they're coming from an anonymous network, we believe that should be suspicious. That should raise some suspicion within your organization, and in that situation, you should probably challenge that authentication request. Ask them for another second factor, right? If the IP reputation comes in and it's one of your known internal network IPs, no problem, let the people through. it's a known IP subnet or network, and so there's no problem. But we believe looking at IP reputation and comparing that with known bad IPs is a really nice layer to add to that second factor. Now, location is also important. Now, this one I think seems really obvious, but it's incredibly important. If you've got a doctor who normally logs in from somewhere in the United States, and all of a sudden that username and password for that doctor is logging in from somewhere in Eastern Europe, again, it may be normal. Maybe that doctor's traveling to a conference. Maybe that doctor is collaborating with a colleague at a foreign university, and there's a legitimate reason that that doctor would be logging in remotely. If you don't have someone actually doing remote work and you do see a remote login, again, this is a good attribute, a good second factor, which when added up with, is this a known device? Does this IP address have a bad reputation? You can start to stack these up and really see how you can get a really good picture of where the user is located, what device they're using to log in, and if they're coming in from an anonymous or an otherwise suspicious network. So geolocation, I definitely feel like, is a very low friction way to tell if somebody's doing something that's out of the ordinary or out of their profile. So what I've been describing to you is getting additional context on the user's login, right? And you can see there's several other attributes that I have listed here under the column that says context. I haven't gone through each of them, but you can see device fingerprinting, so we're looking at the device, we're looking at the IP address. There's some other lookups we can do with respect to directory or location. Is this user logging in from a location that they always log in from, or is it out of the ordinary? You can stack all of these up, and then the individual organization can decide how much emphasis they want to put on each of these elements. And so what you get when you stack these up with the weighted risk scores, you get an overall risk. And then the system can make a decision. You can say, this is a doctor using a known device coming in from his office location with a clean IP address. Okay, that person fits a profile. That is enough background or context that we can allow that person in and still satisfy our two-factor regulatory compliance. So as you'll notice, all of the context authentication factors that I've mentioned don't require the user to put any data in. They don't require the user to do anything. It's all happening in the background. It's all information being collected about their authentication that you as an IT organization can use to make a good decision about whether or not the user using that username and password is in fact who they say they are. So all of these things stack up pretty nicely and work together and work very quickly. And all of these things I've shown you, well, most of these things I've shown you, all work pre-authentication. So when they first go to log in, we can start collecting information, comparing their data, and so before they even get a chance to submit their username and password, we can create a very nice profile about them. Okay, so there's hope, right? The situation is dire in the market. There's a lot going on. However, we believe that combined with a secure remote gateway like Citrix, we do have, through these adaptive authentication methods that I've mentioned, we do have a very nice way for you to improve security and also maintain a good user experience. Okay, so with that, I am going to invite my colleague, Sean Dion, into the conversation, and so I'm going to pass off the presentation control to you, Sean. Welcome to the call.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you for the wonderful overview. And now we're going to look at how we tie these components together. And so the next piece, and what we'll do as the control is provided over to me, is we're going to go through the integration components, how SecureAuth and NetScaler fit together, how we're able to achieve strong authentication, frictionless authentication as part of a great user experience without compromising security, and how we handle situations and scenarios where, with the proliferation of compromised credentials out in the marketplace today and the issues in which it causes organizations, for example, within healthcare, how we can tackle those issues and provide still a great user experience for the healthcare providers. So as we take a look through this process, the first thing that we're going to examine closely is the authentication experience and how we seamlessly hand the user off, not only by providing that adaptive authentication and examining the user as part of the authentication experience, providing a profile, creating a profile, providing them strong access without impeding their workflow or making it more difficult. And the way in which we do this, looking at the slide that we have pulled up here, is that regardless of where the user comes in from, either from an external perspective or from an internal perspective, we're going to take a look at the user context, the information about the user, and layer in all the different methodologies that was outlined by Darren, like the IP reputation checking and the geolocation or geovelocity elements to create that profile about the user. Decide how do we want to handle the authentication workflow. Do we want to enforce or step up authentication because that request may be risky? Or maybe we'll see as part of the process that there's a high probability those credentials are compromised, and what type of workflow experience do we provide the user at that point? As part of the workflow, and then once the user successfully authenticates and everything checks through fine, handing the user off to NetScaler through a standards-based authentication protocol to allow them to continue to single sign-on directly into XenApp or XenDesktop as their typical user experience would be today. So we're going to take a look at the 10,000-foot view and then dive a bit deeper through a couple of demonstrations for each of those components. So as it was mentioned, the first component that we do, the first thing that we look at as part of the authentication request is going to be consuming and accepting who the user is. And as part of that process, we're doing a lot of pre-checks about that user, like where they're coming in from, what's their IP address, are they a known good or bad actor, for example, and relative information that we can capture as part of that first request to authenticate. And all this is done, again, behind the scenes. So there's no user interaction required as part of those key elements to validate proof the user as part of the authentication request. The next component is that we're going to take a look at and validate and vet, is that user identity a valid user inside the data store, whether it be Active Directory or LDAP or some other relational database, validating to make sure we have a good, valid user that's looking to authenticate. And also check to make sure that are they a part of any group memberships that are important as part of the authentication workflow. Maybe we have a subset of users who are allowed VPN access for some who are not. Defining those roles based upon group membership and ensuring that only those users have access to the resources defined as part of their workflow or experience. The next component that comes into play that directly interfaces with the user authentication experience is the actual authentication mechanism itself. So looking at, we support 20+ different methods of authentication, and tying those together, providing them in a method that is easy for the user to use from an authentication workflow experience, but also providing them the appropriate options necessary given either the level of risk associated with the request or specific information about that user themselves. And once the authentication experience completes, we're now going to assert that user's identity directly over to NetScaler, for example, maybe through a SAML assertion, thus providing SSO capability directly on through to XenApp or XenDesktop. And what this provides organizations, and specifically healthcare providers directly, nurses, doctors, and so forth, is it's less clicks that they have to go through, less touch points that they have to go through as part of the authentication experience. And as we all know, that's one of the key things that these healthcare providers are looking for. They want to have a seamless, straightforward, easy way to interface with their systems without complicating the overall process and without creating more work for them in their day-to-day activities as they're looking to take care of individuals. And the final component, and a very key important component, is the audit data. The audit data captures everything about that authentication experience. everything from the IP address from where the user is coming in from to what workflow that they went through. Were they coming in remotely or internally? What methods of authentication were they using as part of that process? Was it successful or unsuccessful? And if so, why? All those key elements are pulled into the audit data that's fed directly into, for example, a SIM tool that your organization may be utilizing today to give you real-time reporting and even be able to provide preemptive measures for exactly use cases like compromised credentials, where a user may come in, for example, provide their credentials and fail the second-factor authentication workflow, and based upon the additional information that we capture about that user, like the IP reputation checking or maybe their location, we can real-time lock that user account and provide an automated email for the user to unlock and go through a self-service password reset workflow, for example, providing real-time front-end protection of your system resources, preventing nefarious attempts and attacks against the network due to compromised credentials. So with all those pieces being said, let's take a look exactly at what that user experience exactly is and how all these things tie together. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a couple of different workflows. The first one is going to be an authentication workflow directly in with NetScaler that's going to pass you directly on through XenApp. And we'll see precisely what that user experience is. So the first component that I go through is I have the option to provide my user ID. So again, consuming that user identity. So as I provide my user ID, the next thing that's going to happen is that it's going to request that I provide some form of second factor of authentication. One of the components that we will get to in just a bit is that frictionless two-factor authentication workflow utilizing the device fingerprint. This particular component, as the first step, we're going to associate the device from which I'm authenticating from as a trusted device and associate it to my identity through a chain of trust. And how we're going to do so is to provide a second factor of authentication, validating who I am, to provide that linkage. And for simplicity purposes, we have a few different options, 20+ different authentication methods, but for the purpose of this demonstration, we're going to do a simplistic method. So for example, we could use a soft token that might be accessible either off the user's desktop or mobile device, for example. For this, we're going to send a quick SMS text message to myself, and then it's going to go ahead and provide that to me, as I will see here within a minute. And as I receive that, I will then present that information to the system to check and validate to make sure that everything checks out. So as you can see here, here's my one-time passcode. So I'm going to go ahead and present that. And now I'm asked for my password. So I'm going to go ahead and provide that to the system. Now once I've authenticated successfully, you can see that real time it passed me directly on from NetScaler into XenApp without having to re-provide my credentials as part of that workflow, directly logging me in. And based upon the applications I then have published to XenApp or Xen Desktop, I can then get direct access to those applications. So now what we're going to do as I log off is we're going to go through a workflow, and let's pretend for a second that I'm somebody who is trying to do something nefarious against the network. I have compromised credentials, and I want to try to provide them to the system and gain access to those critical resources that healthcare providers have access to. I'm going to do that by virtue of a Tor browser, which is going to anonymize my request, hiding my true identity and what I'm trying to accomplish by peeking into the system. So as I do so, I'm going to go ahead and try to gain access to a particular web resource we have set up as part of this user experience. And as it goes through and checks my IP reputation, it's going to denote, as you can see here, that the current IP address from which I'm coming in from is a known bad actor because I'm anonymizing my request, thus most likely trying to do something nefarious against the network. And we can see here that we have a risk factor of 100. Now, as part of the overall solution, this messaging is not something that would be displayed to the end user, but primarily used here from a demonstration tool perspective to show you exactly what happened or what transpired. So as we can see, we performed a hard stop, and didn't ask for anything further as part of that request because it was too risky that we've deemed, and so we've prevented any further activity against that directly. Whereas if I were to try to access that same location from a good known IP address, just like the user experience that we saw as the first login, I can go ahead and provide my user ID. So overall, good user experience, preventing the bad actors from gaining access or even trying to replay credentials or anything else against the network. The next thing we're going to look at, as we had denoted, the device fingerprint. And what's the user experience on that end? Let's take a quick look at that. So we're going to go through the same workflow through NetScaler. And what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and, again, provide my user ID. Now, as I do so, you're going to notice that it's going to check my browser for a credential, and notice that it says, you know what, Sean? You've already authenticated from this device and have associated this with your identity. By virtue of that, and by virtue that the other second factors have vetted out, like your IP address and the location from which you're coming in from, we're just going to ask you for your password. So I'm going to go ahead and provide my password. You notice here, same exact user experience. Pass directly on to XenApp and log directly in so that I can now gain my applications that are published through XenApp. So very seamless, straightforward authentication experience that provides strong authentication, provides a secure path for users to go in from, for example, externally, directly into internal resources, but yet not providing a burdensome user experience. It's very much a frictionless authentication experience that's also secure. So next, what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and I'm going to hand this back off to Darren to present, and we'll continue on. Darren?
Excellent. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate that. I just want to remind the audience that what you were seeing was, in fact, a live demonstration. And so Sean was showing you in real time, you know, the IP reputation lookup. I don't know if you noticed, but it seemed very quick. And so, you know, it was extremely fast. I mean, you know, you wouldn't notice that there was any background checks going on. And the device fingerprint was very quick and a lot of those things. So thank you, Sean. Great presentation, great demonstration. And so, you know, so you can see that in real time. Okay, so what I would like to do now is go back and talk to you a little bit about an actual use case. Houston Methodist is a large nonprofit healthcare organization based in, as you would expect, Texas. They are successfully using this combined solution that Sean showed you to really provide that balance, right? This is all about improving security and preserving a good user experience. So when they came and started talking to us, they said, look, we've got a lot of different applications. They're all accessible via the Citrix infrastructure. We're currently, you know, using hard tokens, which again provides us good security, but there's a lot of users that don't like them and you know, are having a lot of trouble with them, and it's creating a lot of headaches for the IT and the security teams. So we went in and you know, did a demonstration very similar to what you just saw Sean do, showed them this adaptive two-factor, showed them the ease of use, showed them the device fingerprinting and IP reputation, and they loved it. It worked really well in their organization. You know, one of the quote here that Matt Johnson, who heads up server engineering, said, as he said, look, this worked great. We were very pleased with how it worked with all of our Citrix applications. He also said, you know, we were also very pleased to also understand and implement the fact that this works great with our cloud applications. So I wanted to bring up the point that this very much is not a VPN-only situation and solution. It works very well with other application architectures as well. And so that was a really nice quote from him, reminding us that, you know, many organizations have a hybrid environment. They're both, you know, remote access via VPN, secure remote access, but also, you know, with the proliferation of cloud applications, there's a lot of different things they have to be thinking about. There's another quote that's not on this slide, but that Matt does talk about, and he said, you know, when we made the switch to the device fingerprint and IP reputation as our second factor, he told me that he said the doctors and nurses, when they went and did their follow-up to ask them how it was going, they didn't even know they were using strong authentication. They didn't even know that they were being authenticated. They did notice that when they were in the hospital or in the clinic and on the corporate network, that they were never challenged, and when they tried to log in remotely, if they were at Starbucks, if they were somewhere else on a wireless network, they did notice that they were getting more of a challenge and they were being forced to either put a PIN code in or something else. But they said inside the corporate network, inside the hospital, they didn't even know they were using it. So that was a huge win for the IT department and also a huge win for the security department as well. All right, so just a little bit about SecureAuth. We're a privately held company founded in 2005. We're based in California with over 110 employees right now and 10 technology patents. We're very proud of our innovation. We've invented the technology that we're using in our products, so we are not susceptible to a lot of the open source problems that have been in the market, been plaguing the market. We're a very innovative company. We believe that we are focusing on the right things. We're protecting our customers. We're thinking about the next type of attacks, and we're actively working to prevent them. We've been recognized by the media, 5-star rating for our product from SE Magazine, and recognized by other media outlets as well. So we're very proud of our success, and we're very proud to be a Citrix partner. We believe that the secure remote access provided by Citrix infrastructure is doing a wonderful job. It's forced attackers to change tactics, and we believe the combination of SecureAuth IDP technology and Citrix technology combined can help you contain that threat, and we're very, very pleased to have had the opportunity to talk to you about it today. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to remind you that we're available to take some questions, so if you have a question, please type it in. But I'd also like to encourage you to go watch the video that we shot. Matt Johnson very graciously agreed to go on camera and talk a little bit about his experience. And so if you'd like to hear how Matt implemented this combined technology at Houston Methodist, I'd encourage you to visit SecureAuth.com in our case studies section of our website, which is under resources. You'll be able to see the video. It's a very short video, but it's Matt himself talking about how he implemented the combined technology. I'd also like to encourage you to go out to the Citrix Ready Marketplace. Citrix has a lot of our information available as well, and you can see the link there at the bottom of your screen if you would like to see how we put the combined technology together. So with that, I believe we still have some time for questions. And so I would like to thank everyone. And Manju, I'd like to bring you into the conversation and turn the Q&A session over to you at this time.
Hey, thank you so much, Darren and Sean. That was a wonderful presentation and demo. So, as you said, let's move on to the question and answer session now. So we have a few questions coming from the audience, and we'll give them some more time as well while we answer these questions for them to ask more questions. So the few questions that we have in the list are here. The first question is, how does SecureAt store or manage personally identifiable information?
That's an excellent question, and if I may, I'll go ahead and take that. The beautiful thing with the system that we have architected from a security standpoint is that no PII is stored nor transferred at any point to any system outside of our authentication framework. That is a very key component, and specifically in addition to that relation to the user data store. There's no replication of that user data. It's bound and tied directly to your existing data store, thus creating a very secure framework for an authentication workflow.
Great. So second question is, how much custom development is needed to deploy Citrix and SecureAt together?
That's another excellent question, and I'll go ahead and take that again. And so the functionality that is there is completely out of the box. So everything that you've seen today is 100% out of the box working with our solution once you have it set up and running within your organization. Very, very straightforward process, very streamlined.
Great. So the next question is, you talked about live threat intelligence to inspect bad IP addresses. How do you collect that data is the question.
Darren, I'll let you answer that one.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Sean. So how do we collect the IP reputation data? We are using a partner for that data collection. This is not something that SecureAt collects themselves. We're using the Norse Corporation threat intelligence feed. They provide us with a sub-second response. So we collect the IP address. We do ourselves collect much of the context, so we know last login location and device, fingerprint, and some other things. So we do have some of the context, but specifically when we're thinking about IP reputation, we use the Norse threat intelligence feed. We send them the IP address that we collect. They send us back a risk score and some additional information, and then we can help our customers then assign what level of risk they want to assign. So in other words, if it comes back as known bad, we can then work with our customers to set up the workflow, like the one you saw Sean demonstrate. We could either do a hard stop. So he showed you some red text on the screen just for the demonstration that said, complete no-go, right? Like the threat was too high for this particular IP reputation. But if it's somewhere in the middle, if it's not conclusively, bad, but it's questionable, you can then send them to an entirely different workflow, which may go ahead and trigger a challenge, or you can do something even less aggressive, where you can say, let's log this for follow-up by the security team. So so I think that was kind of a long answer to a short question. So we use a partner, Norse, to get the threat feed, but then we help our customers decide how they want to use that data. Do they want to hard stop the authentication, challenge it, or allow it and flag it for follow-up?
Great, thanks, Sean. So we'll give them 2 more minutes. If we can receive some more questions, we can definitely answer those.
Sure.
And meanwhile, just some information to all the attendees who have attended this webinar and who have registered but not attended. So all of them will get the recording of this webinar without fail to your registered email ID within a day or 2. Okay, we just received one last question here. What is the acceptance from the healthcare staff like?
Oh, that's great. So Manju, I'll take that. That's Darren. So what we're seeing is that the healthcare staff are very pleased. They are excited. They don't have to carry a hard token around. They understand that they may occasionally have to register a new device, but they feel like that once the device is registered, the user acceptance has been really, really good. I mentioned Houston Methodist. Matt Johnson mentioned to me that the end users very often don't even know that their device is being used for second factor. So the acceptance has been really good. The user experience is really good. Most staff understand the need for security. I mean, they see the news, they see what we're all seeing, and they want to protect their patients. But in a life or death situation, they definitely need immediate access to their applications and data. And so, they definitely insist on a good user experience, but the acceptance has been really, really good.
Great, thanks, Darren. So I think we are about to end the question and answer session. We don't see any other questions from any attendees. So a request to all the attendees, in case if you have any questions after this webinar, you can definitely reach out to Citrix team at the email citrixready@citrix.com. And with that said, I want to thank Darren and Sean for the wonderful presentation and for their knowledge sharing with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I want to take a moment to thank all the attendees for attending this technical webinar series with Citrix Ready, and this concludes our broadcast. Thank you all.